Final Fantasy is a series loved by many. For generations, these games have been the gateway drug for the JRPG genre and have been great experiences all around. The game that seems to be one of, if not the most loved in the series, is Final Fantasy VII. So many people grew up with this game and love it to death. And sure, the hate some of the die-hard fans throw towards the remake is completely unnecessary. The community doesn't even seem to be super toxic. But no game is perfect, and Final Fantasy VII is one of the greatest examples of all time. The graphics have aged quite a bit, as you can see with the footage I'm showing right now. I got my footage from a PlayStation Classic, don't worry, I didn't buy it, and I regret not booting up the Steam version to play through this amazing game again. While the graphics are horrible for today's standards, the PC version has everything upscaled and beautiful. Well, minus the pre-rendered backgrounds. Jesus, these look terrible. Well, used to look terrible, that is. With the new mod, the game looks better than ever, and if you ever want to experience the game, I recommend using this mod so you don't have your eyes fall out from how horrible the backgrounds look in comparison to the actual game. But with my little graphics tangent out of the way, I think it's about time to start talking about the actual game. Now, here's the thing. Since this is about a 50-hour or so game on a blind playthrough, I'm not going to say much about the details of the story. But I do have something to say about older RPGs in general. In my review of Fallout, I neglected to mention how the story and quests felt. Honestly, if I remade that review, I'd feel a lot better because I did not do that game justice at all. Fallout is a game where you create your own character. So the way the story is presented has to be completely different than in a Final Fantasy game. I understand that. But the world and story of Fallout just felt more engaging to me. Not to shit on the world and story of Final Fantasy VII, but I felt the message of the story wasn't anything groundbreaking. And sure, it may be because this game is over 20 years old, and more engaging stories have been presented in that giant span of time, but Fallout came out the exact same year. Something about the way Fallout is built just has more of an effect on me than Final Fantasy VII. Don't get me wrong, I love both games to death, but the story of a bunch of eco-terrorists who band together in order to save the world is a lot less engaging to me than the rough reality of surviving in the wasteland and throwing your morals out the window for the sake of your own hopes and dreams. Now that isn't to say Fallout is THE better game. They are completely different, but I bring up how each game made me feel in order to show you that not all games are created equal. Because believe me, in terms of gameplay, Final Fantasy VII wipes the floor with Fallout. Creating a combat system that is not only engaging, but also so manipulative you can become so powerful nothing is really a challenge. With a lot of grinding, of course. Honestly, sometimes the game becomes too easy if you abuse its faulty game design. But during the late 90s, I can see why Final Fantasy VII spread like wildfire among young and old. For a time, games didn't really have the guts to be serious, especially in the West. Gaming was still a taboo thing that you wouldn't want the hip kids at your high school knowing about. Now, while Fallout did exist, it was a PC-exclusive game, so I doubt it had an effect anywhere close to that of Final Fantasy VII. But the guts that this game had were very important. Now, while it didn't really have any tact while dealing with things like cross-dressing, prostitution, a bunch of stuff, it didn't shy away from topics like these. The game may be rated T, but it's very adult when it needs to be, especially in the slums of Midgar. Any great city that has amassed a great amount of wealth always has a bad side, and Midgar is no exception. The slums of Midgar are just horrible. You have druggies running around, crimes being committed constantly, a giant prostitution ring dominating one of the markets, and worst of all, this is all accepted. The inhabitants of the slum have just become indifferent to their way of life. Very few want to change their situation. Save for Avalanche. The eco-terrorists that want to save the world. Something about media just loves pushing the whole, companies are bad, and we are ruining the planet with our attempts to make our lives more convenient. While the message itself is something most people can't get behind, I never find it to be anything more than wasted potential. I guess this game gets a pass because it kind of drops the whole environmental thing about 5 to 10 hours in the game, but this also makes you wonder why the game even brought it up in the first place. But, just like the environmental message throughout the game, the adult themes also seem to just kinda disappear. And it seems like the game just started playing it safe after a while in order to not push that T rating to the breaking point. But I guess themes aren't the only element of a story. Characters matter just as much. The way Final Fantasy VII builds its characters is like a shonen anime. And here's what I mean. When you're first introduced to a character, you're given very basic things every character needs. Name, personality, backstory maybe, actual presence. But the game is very picky about what characters get explored beyond that. Almost all of the characters in this game do have growth, but to what extent? I'll bring up Red 13 as I feel he is the most like a shonen side character. When you are first introduced to him, you don't know what to think. He's an animal capable of speech with a disdain towards humans. It also doesn't help that he really doesn't fit in with the rest of the party personality-wise, as he always feels like an outlier up until his own character arc. The character arc in question happens on your first visit to Cosmo Canyon. Here, you learn Red 13's real name, Nanaki, and more about his backstory. You meet a man who he calls his grandfather, and you start to slowly learn about the kind of person Red 13 really is. Red 13, after returning home, is ready to leave the party and help his village. That is, until, I believe it's pronounced Bugenhagen, but I don't know, says he has something to show Red 13. You see, Red 13 lived his entire life believing that his father left him and his mother for dead. When he was young, his tribe was attacked by another tribe known as the Gi tribe, or G. I'm just going to say Gi. To his knowledge, his father had fled and would never return, leaving Red 13 spiteful and untrusting for the rest of his life. The party moves on to inspect the cave of the Gi, in which Bugenhagen is dropping some heavy hints that Red 13 doesn't know the truth about his father. Once they defeat a boss, the truth is revealed. Red 13's father wasn't the coward he had conjured in his mind. He was a brave warrior who pulled a Thermopylae and kept the entire tribe safe while fighting who knows how many of the enemy. The scene in the game is pretty powerful due to the way it's shot and the beautiful score that just immerses you into the scene. With all this said and done, Red 13's personality reforms itself into that of a courageous, prideful warrior that will do anything to save the world. One problem: that's all the development he gets. Throughout the rest of the game, he is just a party member who rarely contributes in any meaningful way to either other characters or the main plot. Sure, he gets more fleshed out through other material related to Final Fantasy VII, but that doesn't make it okay for the game to drop him almost altogether. Worst part is, Red 13 isn't the only character this happens to. Out of the 9 party members, 5 of them are treated this way, and it's kind of upsetting. Each one of these characters are really interesting, and it would be great to see them grow as people. Hell, Vincent gets the most bare minimum development possible. He gets a backstory, and that's it. He doesn't contribute much in the main story, and his main character trait is that he's an edgy vampire. Yeah, not the most interesting. Barrett's just a loudmouth, vulgar guy who cares for the planet and his family who happens to have a shady past. Yuffie is a materia thief who hates Shinra and wants to prove herself to her father. I've already described Red 13, and finally, Aerith. Aerith isn't a character I particularly like. For one, due to story revelations, her romance with Cloud didn't really mean anything to begin with. And I can't talk about Aerith without mentioning the scene. Spoilers for Final Fantasy VII, but I think you already know what it is if you've been on the internet for any amount of time. When I started playing this game, I knew that she was going to die. This fact alone made it so I never really wanted to connect to her, not that she was all compelling. Aerith is an interesting character in which the developers tried making her super interesting and very integral to the plot. but while they succeeded in making her important to the story, they failed in making her interesting at all. She falls into the category of shonen side character to me because she doesn't grow. She starts out promising. She seems like she'll be someone longing to be free of her boring, peaceful life and who wants to make a difference in the world. But the story makes her special because of her bloodline. And this is where I just can't get behind her story. After various plot points, she becomes more and more in tune with her powers. Since she is a Cetra, a type of ancient being who looks identical to humans, she is very spiritual. On multiple occasions, she hears and speaks to the planet. Well, at first, I thought this was interesting. I slowly stopped caring, especially by the time you get to the Temple of the Ancients. It seemed the only reason she was there was to artificially push the story forward, as if Sephiroth didn't do that enough. But that's from someone who played the game 19 years after it came out. I will not deny the impact of Aerith and her death on the gamers of 1997. The characters at the time were all revolutionary in terms of mainstream video game releases, and Aerith's death cemented itself in history as one of the greatest scenes in gaming. This proved once again that the game was not only willing to be serious, but also brave enough to catch the player off guard and completely change how they feel about the game. During this time, they knew people would stop playing if any character at any time could die. But they went through with it. They didn't care what people would think, and it paid off. Aerith isn't just a character. She is a sign of evolution in gaming, and the start of a more serious attitude towards gaming in general. Her death will lead to games that without her might not exist. Gaming took the baton and ran, producing gems such as the Metal Gear series, after the MSX games of course, and many others that would show that games weren't just toys for children. They were art. But today, Aerith didn't mean much to me. And that's okay. Times change. Things that are impactful now may not be in the future. Today, Final Fantasy VII is still a hallmark of gaming, and time won't completely diminish that. Its story will be remembered by millions of people for who knows how long. But for story and characters, I think that's all I want to talk about. So it's finally time to talk about the gameplay. And, this is going to be weird. As I stated earlier, Final Fantasy VII's gameplay is amazing and it stands the test of time. The active time battle system really keeps combat interesting and fair. Minus the occasional situation where the enemies just keep fucking attacking like the goddamn Energizer Bunny. The main draw of Final Fantasy VII's combat is the easy to learn, yet confusing to master, not really difficult, materia system. This bad boy controls everything from magic to stat changes to game-altering bullshit that shouldn't be allowed. If you have to learn anything while playing this game, it is this system. Do not pass it off as something you don't need to bother with. Hell, if you do that, you might not even be able to beat the game, so I probably don't have to worry. There are so many things that can go wrong due to bad programming or glitches. The biggest one, to me, being the W item glitch, that allows you to get infinite amounts of any item in the game. And to top it off, it's super easy to do. I adore this game though. From its presentation, to its gameplay, to its story. Despite how I talked about the characters earlier, I love them all the same. If I didn't, I wouldn't have even considered replaying this game. It is to this day the only Final Fantasy I've played, and I do plan on changing that very soon. After all, I do love me some JRPGs. Final Fantasy VII is a game that any JRPG fan should experience without a doubt. I remember when I first played this game for a couple of hours. I was playing off of my friend's Steam library, and I got so into it, I bought the game just so I could play whenever I wanted. This game is a gem, and I hope that will always be the case in the eyes of us gamers. Whew, okay, I don't know how this video will turn out. This is my first time trying to deter a bit from my usual style, and I don't even know if I even did that. If this video is confusing or unclear, then let me know and I'll see what else I could do. But for now, this has been That Game Review Show, and be sure to check in with James next week. I don't know what he's reviewing, but it's probably something that's going to be around 40 minutes long, so he's got the content.